Welcome to this video on understanding research article genres, which is part of our series on publishing a research article. Most research articles follow similar formats, and that's what we're calling genres. One of the most common genres is the IMRAD genre. This stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. So you would have sections on each of these in a research paper. The IMRAD structure emerged from the sciences and characterizes one of the most common formats used in science journals. But it's really important to have a look at your targeted journal and to see how the papers in that journal conform or differ to the IMRAD model, because they often do. So look at the headings, look what's contained in the different sections. I want to focus on a variation of the IMRAD model here. And this is the genre that's typically found in research articles in the social sciences and education. And you would find these sections: an introduction, a literature review, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. The page length really depends on the targeted journal. I've included page lengths here, but they are really quite arbitrary. The most important thing that I want you to get from this is the weighting of the different sections. So you can see from what I've put up here that the results in the discussions page sections are the most important in a research paper. That's what you want to focus on. Let's go through each section individually, beginning with the introduction. Now, the introduction is usually a couple of paragraphs, but this really depends on the targeted journal, your particular project, and maybe even your discipline. If you are writing a paper or framing a paper in a particular way, you might need more space. But in the introduction section, you would usually have the problem, and this is where you would put the problem, purpose statement, and questions. So you would provide the background to the problem, the context in which the research takes place, and the whole argument you're trying to make is the rationale for this article and the purpose for this paper. In the literature review section, the review of the literature is not so much a review as it is situating the study within this literature. What has been done before, how has it been done, what conclusions have previous researchers come to, what has not been covered. The main argument you're trying to make is that there is a knowledge gap and a need for this research, and this research will fill that knowledge gap. So readers want to be able to see that you know the key thinkers in the field, you understand the key arguments, and that you have a good sense of the literature. Under the IMRAD model, the literature review may fall under the methods section or the introduction itself. In the methods or methodology sections, this is where you explain how you went about conducting the research. The difference between methods and methodology is that in the sciences you would usually talk about methods, whereas in the social sciences you would include the philosophy around the methodology. So it's usually a page long, but it might be longer depending on your particular project or if the methodology was quite significant. And there will be variations depending on your discipline and your field. So let's look at a methodology section in a qualitative paper. You would usually begin with a sentence or two around the paradigm. This might be, for example, critical research or ethnography, the broader kind of framing lens. Then you would outline the research design, perhaps a case study method, and then the step-by-step research methods. So this could be interviews or focus groups, but you would explain the details of how you collected the data, and then a description of the context, the populations, how you went about collecting all that data. It's really common now to find a couple of sentences or a paragraph or two on the data analysis strategy. So this would be a description of how the data was analyzed so that your audience could see how you achieved your results. And the same thing for, validity, which in qualitative research you may not call it validity, you might call it trustworthiness. But if you did anything that would help convince your readers of the validity of your results, you want to put that in here. And the role of the researcher is something else that you often see. In quantitative research methods sections, you would usually see something on the study design, the conditions, methods, materials and variables, the research site, how you collected the data, the measures and observations, the statistical analysis, and of course the validity. The results section is usually a fairly large proportion of the article overall, and here you present the results of your analysis. Analysis involves breaking the data apart and regrouping or reorganizing the data into new units. If you collected interview data, for example, you might group it into particular themes across the interviews. Data analysis is usually systematic and is often presented visually. In the discussion section, which is also usually a fairly long section of a research article, you might want to begin by returning to the research problem, purpose, or questions. But in this section, you're making sense of your findings for your reader, and you can do this in a number of different ways. One is to address the research questions that you identified in the introduction. Have you been able to answer these questions? The second way would be to compare your findings to other studies in the literature, to go back to your literature review, and that would provide a coherence. And then you want to interpret the significance of your results. Explain to your readers what the results mean and what the implications are for this study. And you may want to include a discussion of unexpected results, things that you didn't plan for. You might also discuss the limitations of the study and how this might have affected results. The conclusion is usually 1 or 2 paragraphs long, and most writers tend to ignore the conclusion. But this is where you really want to send your message to the reader. You want to summarize the points of the paper, but it's not just a summary, you're emphasizing certain things, and you want to show the main contribution of the paper. So as I've said before, even though I've identified research articles as having particular sections, you really need to have a look at your targeted journal and examine how the genre works in that journal, because it may be quite different. Look at the different sections, what's gone into those different sections, look at the headings, and then write your paper accordingly. So read through articles in your targeted journal with that eye. So the key points from this video is that most research articles follow similar formats or genres. The IMRAD genre is one of the most common ones found in the sciences. Another variation and very common format is the one we've gone through in this video: the introduction, literature review, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. But even though genres are common, you need to examine targeted journals to see how they work in that journal. Thank you very much for watching this video, and good luck with writing your research article.